Here we go again. First it was What the Health, which was subsequently torn to shreds by the scientific community. Now we have Game Changers. This is the latest one in a list of pro-vegan propaganda documentaries that is so full of shit, misinformation and lies and exaggerations. It pisses me off so much to think that there'll be so many people that don't know any better that will be sucked in by this bullshit. I really wasn't going to say anything about this because honestly, if you're getting your nutritional information from documentaries, you're just asking for trouble. They are way down the list on reliable sources of information because so many documentaries, not all, but so many documentaries have a very biased agenda to put across. And Game Changers is no different. Now, before you start to flex your little typing fingers, those of you that are pro-vegan, let me be clear. I am not against veganism as such. It's not a choice I would make, but I am not against people doing it for themselves. It's horses for courses. What works for some won't work for others, and if veganism works for you, fucking good for you. You direct your own traffic and don't try to shove your beliefs down other people's throats. I understand there is an ethical argument to being a vegan as well, and although I think a lot of vegans are blissfully unaware or conveniently overlook some very pertinent facts with regards to their argument in that department, that is a discussion for another day. I want to focus on the nutritional aspect and how it's portrayed in this documentary. The reason I'm so pissed off about this is because I grew up as the fat kid. I grew up getting sucked in by one-sided biased documentaries like this and fad diets and quick fix gimmicks. So when I see my newsfeed full of people saying how much they've learned from Game Changers, it was really eye-opening, knowing that it was so full of shit, it really makes my blood boil. Game Changers documentary aside, vegan zealots, vegan advocates in general have gotten so out of control, have become so militant in shoving their beliefs down people's throats that it has become like a religion. And there's a saying about religion, it's like a penis. It's great that you've got one, it's great that you're proud about it, but don't get it out in public and start waving it around, and definitely don't try to shove it down someone's throat. But like I say, I'm not against veganism. If that's what you want to do, fill your boots. What I am against is lies and misinformation, because the health and fitness industry is already full enough of that shit without another propaganda documentary coming along and brainwashing people that don't know otherwise. In the first part of the movie, we see the narrator, James Wilkes, a former MMA fighter with a less than stellar record, I might add. So his choice to go plant-based hasn't exactly been a shining light in top-class MMA competition. But that aside, we see him banging on about how the Roman gladiators were fed a plant-based diet, that they were somehow lauded warriors that were given the best of medical attention and fed the best food. Cut the shit. Let's be honest here for a second. Gladiators, in almost all cases, were slaves that were trained to fight and kill each other for entertainment. Their vegetarian diet, as many believe, was not a consequence of their slave status. They were fed this carb-rich diet to create a generous layer of fat around their bodies. It meant nerve endings weren't as exposed. A lot of cuts would have been less severe. That additional layer of fat would have made for a better spectacle because those wounds were essentially shallow, but they'd still be gushing blood and they could still fight on. Then the documentary goes on to say how Nate Diaz's victory over Conor McGregor in the UFC was somehow evidence that Nate's plant-based diet was what made him the superior fighter on the day. He might have won that fight, but you want to know something? Conor McGregor, who is a meat eater, then went on to beat him in the rematch. And I mean, Nate, although a crowd favourite, is far from a top-tier competitor. There's plenty of other fighters that are not plant-based that have seen far greater success than he has. Khabib Nurmagomedov, the current champion in that weight class, is 28-0, and he eats meat. So it's hardly a damning indictment of people that consume meat that are athletes. I mean, they go on to do this with a list of other athletes throughout the documentary, cherry picking the ones that they think will somehow lead people to believe that they need to go plant-based as well if they want to be an athlete. And never mind the fact that a number of these athletes started out consuming meat or were vegetarian before they switched to veganism. Never mind the fact that some of their performances have failed to live up to their previous standards since they've switched. But they won't tell you that in the pro-vegan documentary, will they? There was even one free runner, his name's Tim Sheath, was removed from production because he outright said veganism had ruined his health. Not the sort of testimony you want in your vegan documentary. My biggest disappointment, though, was from the man himself, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I've always seen Arnie as a bit of a role model of sorts. 7-time Mr. Olympia, one of the greatest bodybuilders of our time, but that also makes him one of the most prolific steroid users of our time as well. And not to mention, he built his success consuming meat while he was an athlete as well. But somehow at 72 years of age, decades after he's ever competed professionally, because he switched to a plant-based diet, this is somehow evidence that we need to do it too. Wouldn't be anything to do with the fact that you've gone into a joint venture with LeBron James, would it, Arnie, to sell vegan supplements? It doesn't matter which one of these athletes you look at. There's plenty of other competitors in their chosen fields that are not plant-based that have seen the same amount, if not greater success. So what this highlights is sporting prowess doesn't just come down to diet alone. It comes down to training, to sleep, to mindset, to resources available. I mean, if it was diet alone, wouldn't you think Usain Bolt, one of the greatest Olympic athletes and sprinters of our time, who was estimated to have eaten over 1,000 chicken nuggets at the Beijing Olympics, would have failed to qualify, let alone win multiple gold medals? The studies referring to meat in Game Changers include hot dogs, pizza, KFC, burgers, pies, Spam, and whatever other processed garbage you can think of. But when you look at any credible research that was tightly controlled and excluded processed bullshit like this, it shows no advantage or disadvantage for healthy individuals that consume diets with meat or diets that are plant-based. Oh, and the peanut butter sandwich can give you just as much protein as 3 ounces of meat or 3 boiled eggs. Do you know how much peanut butter you've got to eat to get the same amount of protein? It's roughly 600 calories worth of peanut butter. I mean, are you going to be putting that on the bread with a shovel? Let's not forget the 200 extra calories for the slices of bread. So there's 800 calories. 3 boiled eggs will give you roughly about 200 calories. That's a 600 calorie discrepancy. If you're going to implement that strategy to get your protein in your diet, please be sure to send me your before and after photos, because I know which fucking direction that's going to go. And beetroot juice, improving your bench press by 19%. What a load of shit. I mean, even if that was true, it would be a banned substance. That's a better improvement than some performance enhancing drugs. Then there's the argument that many sources of plant protein have a complete amino acid profile as opposed to animal-based sources. Now that's true, but what they don't tell you is that you also need a certain amount of leucine, another type of amino acid, to kickstart muscle protein synthesis. In simple terms, it's the body's way of absorbing the protein into the muscles and utilizing it. And plant-based sources of protein are really low in leucine, which is why it's suggested that vegetarians or vegans also supplement with leucine so that they get the maximum benefit from their protein sources. Otherwise, you have to eat bucket loads of those plant-based proteins to get the same effect. Then there was the fear tactics and scaremongering of that doctor that wrote the book about how eating meat will create erectile dysfunction. Are you fucking kidding me? Again, there's more factors than diet alone that affect somebody's ability to gain and maintain an erection. That's right. I just said the word erection. Sleep, exposure to sunlight, food quality, fat mass. But no, now this doctor's got guys worrying that they won't be able to perform in the bedroom. You fucking asshole. And never mind all these other doctors and health experts that are shown throughout the documentary. If you Google their names, you will find every single one of them either has a book to sell, or a cooking course, or some other product and service that is a pro-vegan money spinner for them. I, on the other hand, have zero vested interest in whether you eat meat or whether you eat a plant-based diet. I don't give a shit. That is your choice. What I can't cop is these outright lies, exaggerations, and the misinformation so that this small group of individuals can make a large sum of money. Not only does Arnie have a vegan product range to sell, turns out James Cameron, the director, has just purchased one of the largest pea processing plants in North America. It will soon be the largest producer of organic pea proteins. Fancy that. I am not against veganism. If that's what you want to do, go for it. If you've got to tell lies to convince people that your beliefs and way of life is the only way to live, you are part of the problem. Research has clearly shown that there is not one diet that is optimal for all individuals. Different things work for different people. So for those of you beating the vegan drum, just stop. For those of you that have unfortunately wasted 90 minutes of your life watching this propaganda bullshit, my pro tip, stop getting your nutritional information from documentaries.